Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and you're in for a real treat today because I'm in for a real treat today. I have Tom Kline with me. Tom is a author. He's also a risk management expert in an area I had not previously considered. We're going to explore that with him. So, Tom, first of all, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Tom, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to doing this.
So, could you tell us your professional background?
Sure. I have been in the automobile industry for almost 35 years. I'm a third generation car guy. My grandfather started the car business in 1925. So next year it'll be 100 years that there'll have been Kleins in the car business.
So I want everyone listening or watching this podcast to understand what he just said. Car business. Not too many people think about that when they think about risk and compliance and corporate compliance. So, Tom, we're going to explore the parameters of what you do and how you help those in the car business manage the risk. And can I maybe start out by asking what are some of the biggest risks? And I would preface that by saying many of my listeners may have anti-bribery, anti-corruption compliance backgrounds. They may have anti-money laundering. They may be export control and sanctions compliance officers. But risk is risk. What are some of the key areas of risk you help automobile dealerships manage?
Sure. Great question, Tom. So first, I would say that at a retail, any kind of retail business, I'd say you have to manage what I call your two-legged problems first, right? Which is your customers and your employees. And in the automobile business, making sure you have happy customers that aren't going to go complain to the Federal Trade Commission, the attorneys general, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, your state politicians, the state police, any of the list goes on and on, right? The IRS, the EEOC, handling those two-legged problems, meaning your customers and your employees, is probably the key thing to keeping problems at bay at car dealerships. Because unanswered or without resolution, a lot of those problems, those kinds of people spin and they keep spinning until they find somebody to handle their problem. And that's where you start having regulatory problems and lawsuits and that kind of thing. So I would say that's number one. And then number two, unintentional advertising violations is really, I would say those are the top three things that car dealers should be aware of.
So that's fascinating for many corporate compliance professionals because their customers are employees, internal
Right.
employees. And here you have employees and customers, but they're separated and it brings a level of complexity. How do you manage, or typically you would encourage a corporate compliance officer to have culture speak up, a hotline, a some way for someone to bring information? Do you try to do that with your customer base or is that different in your world?
It's much the same, although I'm going to say that there are two areas that are important to think about. Number one, I encourage anybody in the retail business on a daily basis to make sure that someone at the company is assigned to look at the internet, to look at the Googles, the Facebooks. If there are any industry websites where people could complain in the car business, there are multiple websites where customers will go complain. Bring those complaints to the attention of somebody who has the authority to do something about it and not respond with a canned response. Anytime you see a canned response, my favorite, Tom, is when somebody will lay out their entire complaint and they'll say, here's all my complaints. And then the corporate response will be, please send please send details of your complaint to this email address. And they just told you what their complaint was, right? There wasn't any question about it. And so it makes them sound tone deaf as to what the problems are. So kind of scouring the internet on a daily basis, I think is important no matter what kind of business you're in, but especially the retail business. And then secondarily as an example, for my retainer clients and also available for everyone is a website that I call alwaysdobetter.com. And what alwaysdobetter.com does is we put up a QR code with big signs next to all the exits and on the back of the bathroom stalls. This is for our team members and guests, so that if they have a problem, instead of going on the internet, they'll scan the code, type in what the problem is, then that goes to somebody who has authority to fix it. And so you're trying to catch problems early, right? That's what risk mitigation is, trying to catch problems before they become bigger problems. And so that's a very inexpensive thing that I do to try to mitigate those problems.
Tom, car dealerships have another level of risk, and I'm gonna sort of naively say it's the risk above them, or the car manufacturers, or the people who they get their inventory or stock from. Do you help dealerships manage the upstream risk as well?
Sure. So anytime you're managing risk, of course, it's upstream and to the side and down at 360 degrees. I've developed a 48-page manual which describes all of the laws and the rules and the regulations that automobile dealers are required to follow. And I do work in other industries, but of course, because my background has been in the car business, a lot of my clients are either tech startups who want to sell to automobile dealers or automobile dealer groups. But the car business is one of the most regulated businesses there is, including, in my opinion, more than banking, right? More than the stock market, because you've got all these different regulatory bodies who are looking at you, depending on your size, depending on what it is. And everybody loves to ding on a car dealer, right? Car dealers don't do so well in court, right? They'll never get the benefit of the doubt. The customer is always going to get the benefit of the doubt. So managing your manufacturing, your relationship with your manufacturer is important. Maintaining good communication, which is a lot of risk management, is having clear, concise communication. I like to say without tone, because so many people will communicate a tough message with tone that doesn't ever go over very well. And of course, compliance is part of all that. And I've kind of redefined compliance recently, which is someone has to do a thing, whatever that thing is, at a certain point in time and then prove that it was done, right? That's what compliance is. Unless you're trying to go with the telling your wife that dinner will be at 6 o'clock and you better comply, right? Nobody likes compliance. And by human nature, we don't love that. I'm trying to redefine that a little bit in my communication, in my business.
When you sit down with an automobile dealership owners, do you do they understand the concept of risk mitigation and risk management? And I would once again preface that in the corporate world, that's what we talk about. But do they view themselves as different because they're selling to consumers?
I think the answer is kind of twofold. Yes, they think of themselves as different because they're selling to consumers. The term risk management or risk mitigation isn't one that's been used heavily in the automobile business. And when I say to new clients, potential clients, the first thing we're going to do is sit down and go through your insurance policies, see where your vulnerabilities are, see what's excluded, see what you hadn't thought of, talk about what could be excluded in the case of a lawsuit. That gets very complicated. That's a 120-day process right there, because automobile dealers have so many disparate policies that they have to buy. It's not like many businesses where you buy one policy and everything is covered, so to speak, with the exception of potentially employers liability or cyber and or pollution. But in car business, a typical dealership could have 10 different policies. It gets very complicated and convoluted very quickly.
I have to say this is fascinating because I'm a lawyer by professional background, but I come out of the energy industry. And one of the things I learned very early was how to read a commercial general liability policy or CGL,
Right.
which everyone has. Here in one of the most sophisticated, dangerous industries of the world, we have one, maybe two policies, and you've just identified 10
Yeah.
that you must understand. And in energy, we talk about insurance as a risk mitigation strategy. Does
Right.
that resonate with your audience as well?
Very much. Once I think that businesses, I read a recent statistic that only 62% of businesses understand their insurance renewal process. And like 32% will actually engage with their policies to have some level of understanding. And so I think business owners in general, whether it be it small or big, go through a very frustrating insurance renewal process, which is some brokers will bring you bad news 2 weeks or 10 days before your renewal date and say, good news, there's only a 19%, increase this year. And then the business owner is stuck being able to maneuver and not being able to get other quotes and not understanding why it's that percentage. And going through that very frustrating process is something that I think most business owners go through. In terms of understanding the policies, a lot of business owners don't understand when to turn in a claim or what's covered or what may be covered. In some cases, when a problem comes to their desk, they don't think of it as, okay, this is an insurance problem. I'm going to turn it over to my insurance company and I'm going to let them mess with it. They're starting to pay lawyers I had coffee with 4 lawyers yesterday. We were talking about this very topic, which is when do you turn over a claim and will your policy cover it? And I think business owners generally, not only in the auto business, but they don't understand what's covered and what's not. So they don't know how to maneuver when they have a problem.
So this is one of those times you've opened a rabbit hole, and I'm gonna dive in head first.
Good.
Because I was a coverage lawyer for many years, and even today, I'm asked, "Tom, would this claim be covered under our CGL? Would this indemnity claim be covered?" And I actually will use that in negotiations and explain to the other side, "Here's what you've asked for. Here's why we cannot or our policy does not have coverage for that." Do people sort of understand you have to look at the policy and try to determine what may be covered and what may not be? And do you provide those coverage analysis services?
I do provide those coverage analysis services. And in my experience as being an owner of a dealership for 30 years, I had many of those instances, many that came across my desk. And so, understanding, as I'm sure you'll agree with me, that there's an art to putting in a claim, right? There's an art to the turn of phrase. There's art to how you put it in and what you say and how you say it often can determine whether there is coverage or not.
Uh, we could go way too far down for my audience, so I probably should relieve myself of my enthusiasm to discuss coverage issues
We
by
can
moving on to
we can do a
Tuck the
second we'll do a second show on that one. How's that?
sounds good. Let's go to Tuck the Octopus.
Okay.
Tell us about Tuck the Octopus, where you came up with the idea, and what does Tuck do for you and your client base?
Yeah. So as you'll see behind me, I have octopi all over the place. A lot of these were gifted to me by clients and colleagues. So I like to say that running a business or running a dealership is like trying to tuck an octopus into bed, but the tentacles keep flopping all over the place, right? Because you've got problems and you've got two-legged problems and you've got all these things coming at you constantly. And so my job as a risk mitigation professional is to try to tuck those tentacles in and keep them tucked in by by identifying what potential problems the business has and then trying to find solutions for those problems or putting in barriers or policies or excuse me or procedures where they will help you mitigate your risk when you have those kinds of problems. And I'm glad to go in and give you a few examples if that's helpful, Tom.
Sure.
Yes, for example, I was quoted in the Wall Street Journal many years ago because I came up with an innovative way of a customer trying to resolve a customer problem before they went to a lawyer. And I put in our documents, which were customer facing, that as a condition precedent to a customer going to a lawyer, they were required to come see me to see if I could help them resolve that problem. And that was a part of the contract. And on occasion, when the customer didn't come see me first, I'd tell the lawyer and show them that this was a condition preceding to filing a lawsuit and they could go ahead and file, but I was going to file a motion to have the customer have to come meet with me in order to try to resolve it because we're customer friendly. We want to help. We want to resolve anything that's a potential problem. And so that's a good example of how you use some creativity to make sure that you're resolving those problems early where you can keep the costs down and not have to you know, mess with a lawsuit. So that's one way.
Tom, we've talked about the many bodies who have tentacles into the automobile industry. You talked about regulation, customers, consumers, states, federal. I would like to maybe I live in the great state of Texas, and we have a law here called the PMPA, if you might be familiar with that. And so, no, there's it's a law that basically requires automobile manufacturers to sell through dealerships in the state of Texas.
Yes.
They can't sell directly.
There are
And so
many.
we have regulatory oversight from literally the state legislator. And it really I started thinking about that when you said this industry is actually more regulated than banking. So the multiple levels of regulation and oversight here are really complex. I probably should have started the podcast with this because I really didn't realize the passion you're going to bring here. I want to talk about you, Tom Kline, next year being 2025 and the 100th anniversary of a Kline being in the auto business and really the passion you bring around that business, around selling cars. And go back to your grandfather and to your father and any of other family members. Why does that passion exist? Is it because we're so passionate about cars? Is it, because of transportation, just a basic from a horse to a car to a something else? It's clear that there are families like yourself who are longtime automobile dealership owners, but it seems to be it's more than a business.
Sure. I mean, we truly in the car business, in my opinion, are in the hospitality business. We are in the business of taking care of our customers. And it gets complicated because you've got this mechanical thing that breaks. Sometimes it breaks and it's covered under warranty, and sometimes it breaks and it's not covered under warranty. And my family has very much tried to provide for the transportation needs of the customers in Virginia. And now with my consulting practice, I'm all over the place. Last week I was in Michigan, and the week before I only was home 7 days since August the 28th, and today's October the 8th. So I've been to many different cities over the past month and a half. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were say something?
I was gonna say, but it equally works from the customer side because for 35 consecutive years, I bought a Ford. And when I bought my first Chevy, I felt very strange walking into a Chevy dealership, and
Right?
I couldn't communicate that to my wife. "This is not right. I'm doing something wrong here," but so you have that passion on both sides, it seems to me. Is that fair too?
Yeah, I mean, there's tremendous brand loyalties, and crossing the streams like you did, it doesn't feel great, right? You're not sure what you're doing, especially when you've had that loyalty to probably to the same dealer and to that brand. And for whatever the reason you decided to cross over and get something else. So yes, I think that customers do have brand loyalty. On the other side, you've got to for those who have had difficulties in their life, getting them in transportation, they're not as brand loyal, right? They just need transportation. And you see, you've got those kind of customers. And then you've got fleet customers like police departments who buy vehicles. And then you've got small businesses who buy vehicles, all the jobbers, plumbers, and electricians, and all those people who have those vans that they need. Being in the transportation business, you're really providing things to the entire population of anybody who drives, which is lots of different people. Unless you're in big city world, some people take public transportation, in which case it's not as big a deal if there is good public transportation.
Let me pick up on something you said because it certainly applied to me. Dealership loyalty. I bought from one dealer and literally from one salesman for 25 of those years. Uh, I just pick up the phone and call and say, "This is what I want."
Right.
We had that kind of relationship. So what
Sure.
does it mean for that dealer loyalty as well?
Yeah, I mean, from the dealer side, I'll give you an example. We used to, when I was meeting with customers and when I was at the stores, and I would meet with some of the customers who had concerns that needed addressing. And some of those conversations, they would get very upset, of course, because it's an expensive purchase. And I would always say to them, we made a mistake. I apologize for making a mistake, but let's not judge us on that we made the fact that we made a mistake. Let's judge us on the fact that we're going to fix your problem. And once you fix that problem and you are a man of your word, that creates tremendous customer loyalty, right? Because they know if they have a problem, they can come see you and they can get the problem fixed. And I had customers, as an example, I was actually physically at the store for 30 years. I had some customers who bought 6 and 7 vehicles from me, right? Over that period of time because they knew I would help them, and just like you, they pick up a phone and say, "I want a such and such, have it ready." They knew I'd be fair with them about the price, and off we'd go, and so it was a lovely relationship. I think hearkening back to the hospitality side, we're there to host them and make this as seamless and as easy as possible. And now there are a lot more ways to do that now by picking up people's cars and dropping them off. So they don't actually have to come into the dealership. And some dealerships have the quote pizza tracker kind of situation where if you call in and you want to know what's going on with your car, anybody at the dealership can tell you because there's technology that will help with that kind of thing. And so some of the barriers are being broken down and dealers are very cognizant of wanting to earn your business and keep it.
You also bring up another point I'd like to explore. When I did finally move on from Fords, I bought my wife Audis, and I was frustrated with Audi because they had a rotation of salesperson, so I never got to know anyone. But their service was completely different. They had longtime service employees who were dedicated to long-time or long-term customers, and there was someone you could literally call and know you're gonna be treated. Could you talk a little bit about the service aspect of a dealership?
Sure. I mean, listen, I think there's 18,000 franchise dealers in the country. And of those 18,000, I don't know how many are owned by the same companies, right? But you have a huge number of dealerships who do things a different way. And one of the things that has evolved over the last, I'm going to say 5 or so years, certainly right before COVID and during COVID, is your access to the technician, right? Sometimes the technician will do a video walk around of your car, pardon me, and say, here's, hi, I'm Tom, I'm your technician, and here's what's going on with your car. Here's a video of it. And here's the underneath. Here's why I say such and such should be fixed. And it helps in for you to trust the dealership and trust the mechanic because you're actually physically seeing what's going on. And sometimes we all were like, well, I wonder if that really was broken. And I wonder if they're just trying to sell me some stuff. And there's certainly bad apples in the business, but for the most part, I'd say, dealerships are upstanding members of their community. They want to do the right thing and they're there and they're a multi-generational business in many cases. So they want you to be happy and they don't do those kinds of things.
Tom, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more about your business, or Tuck the Octopus, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Anyone can call me on my cell phone. That's the quickest, easiest way. That number 757-434-7656. I'm very active on LinkedIn as Tom Kline. I'm very active on Facebook, or you can go to my website, which is bettervantagepoint.com. Or you can also go to tucktheoctopus.com. That'll get you to the same place. And so feel free to reach out. I'm happy to get your call.
Tom, I really have enjoyed myself. I hope we can continue this conversation.
I hope so too, Tom. I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.